Hi guys, thanks for tuning into the channel today. Just before we go over and have a look at the bike, I just thought I'd just show you this nice little spot I just pulled up at. Anyway, you haven't seen nothing of the bike for the past 2 weeks because it's been in for its first service, so we'll head off over to the bike and take a look. Yeah, so one thing I've learnt from a first service on a motorcycle, which I'm not accustomed to even though I've had quite a few bikes, pre-book ahead. Just don't front up to the dealer and leave your motorcycle and say, okay, do the service when's required or whenever you get a chance to do it, and I'll come back and pick it up, because I did something similar to that and it took about 12 days. Now, it wasn't the dealer's fault, it was my fault for not booking the bike in the first place. And while the bike was there, I was unaware that there was a recall on the bike on the front bolts to the rotor, and they had a bit of trouble getting them, and in the end they still didn't arrive after 12 days. So I decided to go and collect the bike and go from there. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm in Australia. The service on this bike for a first one was $270 Australian. For the $270 you got an oil drop, and the oil they used was the Motorex factory oil. So I got the oil drop. They had to put a little bit of fluid in it. On the coolant side, it had dropped a little bit from, I noticed prior to taking it in, it had dropped from, it's up nice and high now, but it had dropped down to about just slightly above the low level. So that was about $2 according to the invoice, which I'll show you the invoice on this thing. So it was around about $90 the charge of the oil, $2 for that, for the coolant, about $10 for some other sundries, and the other was tied up $160 in the labour. So when we take a look at the TFT display on the bike, the next service now on this particular bike is due in 1 year, or at 7,500 kilometres. I'll swing over and see if we can hook her up. So, with our switcher on, we'll head to settings. We'll go over to the favourites. We'll work our way down to services. We'll click over and it shows you that 7,490 kilometres, next service. Now, as a rule, I really don't throw out money on services because usually I think they're a waste of money. I'd rather do it myself. But seeing this is a KTM, and I'm a bit concerned about all the electronics on this particular bike, and if anything goes wrong, I figured if I didn't do the right thing, pay the money for the first service, at least it's covered up to 7,500 kilometres. If anything goes wrong, I only have to run 50 kilometres to the dealer, drop the bike off, get them to fix it for free, and I'm covered in that direction for a small outlay of $270. Whereas when I've had the Enfields, I've usually just taken a risk and just done the service myself, because they're a very simple bike with running not much in the electronic wise, where this bike is very well loaded with electronics, and I'd say overall it'd be pretty expensive to fix if you didn't do the right thing. Now, apart from these two bolts that they're due to replace in the rotor, over in India there's been a problem with the fuel line. So there's been a bit of a kink or something like that, and it's been affecting the fuel feed. So I think I'll just wait now for the advice to come to Australia to say they're going to replace it with the new line, and then take it back and get the bolts and the line done all at the same time. One other thing I'm trying different at the moment, I've raised the windscreen now to the higher setting, so that was fairly simple. Just undo that on head there, take your shield off, lift it up to the next point, attach it back on. Very simple job to do, and I'm just testing that now, or I will be testing it over the next few days to just see if I can notice any difference between the high setting and the low. Now, while we're at it, guys, if you looked at a couple of my previous clips, you'll recall that I put a 14 tooth front sprocket on my bike to see if it had climbed the hills a little bit better. Well, I found when I did put the 14 tooth on the front, I did get a bit more engine noise, up into the motor there, like a sort of, it was just a little bit more noisier anyway. When you could hear it in the motor, it was a little bit more growlier down there in that area. It was just sprocket noise. When I fitted that sprocket, I found that the factory sprocket was more rubber insulated on both sides, where the aftermarket sprocket was just a steel sprocket, and that's all there was to it. Now I don't know if that had anything to do with it or not, but when I put this bike back in for the service, I put the factory sprocket back on it, just kept everything standard. I might just keep the 15 tooth on it for a while now. And the big news at the moment is, over in India, there's a guy over there that makes custom sprockets. So like I said, I found the 14 tooth sprocket a little bit noisy when I was riding along. I had never had any other complaints about that. It did the job all right. But I was researching a bit, and I got onto a guy in India that makes custom rear sprockets, and he makes a 47 tooth for the rear one. So I think this is a 45, so it goes up 2 teeth for the rear. Now I figured I might actually try that 47 on it, so I got in contact with him, and the price of the sprocket worked out at roughly $70 for the sprocket itself. But the freight was a bit pricey, and it worked out $100 Australian to freight it. That's by DHL, I think. That's the only one that they'll freight with. So all up, it's going to cost me $170 to get that sprocket. Now when that rear sprocket arrives, I'll fit it, and then I'll take the bike out and try it with the 47 tooth rear sprocket running the 15 tooth front sprocket. Okay guys, so that's about ends my update on the bike. So at least now my service has been done, and I don't have to worry about forking out any more money until that 7,500 kilometre service. And looking back at what the first service cost at the 1,000 kilometre mark, I think that 7,500 kilometre job will be a doozy. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, taking a look. Catch up with you later.